I think everything generally sounds nice in theory. It's also just assessing the various contexts that your idea sits in and how that can exist over time. Because an idea that would have been born out of the experiences of lockdown during the pandemic would perform completely differently in today's climate, because that was a very temporary situation, and all those certain products like Clubhouse, for instance. During lockdown, Clubhouse made so much sense because everyone was online. You could go on Clubhouse, listen to so many spaces and stuff like that. They were almost acquired by Twitter. They denied. Then Twitter built Twitter Spaces, and then they still exist, but they're not as widespread as they were during lockdown.
Okay.
And I think that came with a lot of gray areas in terms of how the product would translate over time when people started going out more often and stuff like that. And so that's just one quick example of maybe not assessing as many tangents as one could have at the peak of things, but it's also just acknowledging the fact that not everyone lives the same life as you, and in some cases you might find that you might be addressing a niche market, but is this a niche market that has a big pocket, for instance?
Okay.
So you can still keep your business afloat that way,
okay.
Or is it an accessibly affordable product or service that millions of people need,
okay.
right? So there's two touch points, and establishing that also even determines how you market those products to certain people, because more high-end products for smaller audiences of people wouldn't necessarily be sitting in a newspaper ad or something. So it's also just looking at how all of that ties in together. And like you mentioned, I was basically working in Newcomer 3 years before I went full-time. And that indication of going full-time was one, having the external funding from our pre-seed.
Yeah.
And that made things realistic, because up until that point, Nigel and myself, or at least for us, at least for me, the only reason why I was still working full-time and working in Newcomer was because I was using my salary to pay our team's salaries as well. It's the same mechanism for Nigel.
Yeah.
And for us, we knew that that turning or like pivotal point would have been having that external investment where we could sustain people's salaries with that investment, as we also had salaries from that same investment as well. And there's less of a need to be working externally for someone else when the funding is coming from another source. So that's one tangent, but then also the other side of it was the experience of working in agencies gave me the knowledge of certain processes and certain principles that also further validated the idea, in the sense that working in an agency made me familiar with the producer, knowing that they needed a freelancer every few weeks for a project, or 2 to 3 people in a team might quit, and we need to fill in those those full-time roles within a set amount of time. So all of those, like, presumably small situations were all insights for what we're building with Newcomer. Yeah, so all of that was also like validating the idea.